Welcome back to this week's Parent Parsha series, Parshat Teruma. I wanted to thank everybody for their patience while we went on a little bit of a hiatus. The past 2 weeks was a little bit crazy in this house. We had some COVID. We had just lots of moving pieces, but we are back, thank God, and everybody is healthy and well. I wanted to just take a few minutes to think about Parshat Teruma. I think sometimes we get into this next segment of Parshiot, and sometimes it feels hard. We just came out of very vivid stories around Yetziat Mitzrayim, around Matan Torah, and then we kind of hit very detailed Parshiot about the construction of the Mishkan, and sometimes it's hard to get through, just in terms of like the language is difficult. It's also very detailed in terms of the descriptions of each of the kelim. And so I find oftentimes, though, that just a rereading of the Parsha also allows us an opportunity to see new things because there's always something new to find, to learn, to think about. And one of the things that I was thinking about when I was rereading this week's Parsha and actually going back and thank God, I guess I'm plugging this for anybody who doesn't do this. Some people feel very strongly not doing this, but I like writing notes in my Tanakh from different shirim that I've been to. So when I open it again, it also gets my brain going about the things that a question I might have had at a different period of time. Maybe I'm thinking about the question differently today than when I thought about it then. A different shiur that I heard, all different pieces somehow that I wrote at different times, all coming together, that help us think about where we are in time and life, and that the Torah always has the most beautiful aspect of taking us through all aspects and moments of time of life. In this week's Parsha, we're introduced to the Mizbeach, the menorah. We're also introduced to the kruvim, which are on top of the Mizbeach, that are on top of the Aron, facing each other. And there's a lot of discussion about the details of these kelim and how they are made and how they are made and how they are built. Couple important points that I'd like for us to think about, and particularly how it relates to a potential message that we can think about, is the fact that inside the Aron HaKodesh are two luchot. There are the luchot that are broken and the luchot that are complete. And I think that that's an important piece for us to think about and hold on to as we think about the fact that the source of Hashem's Shekhinah within the Mishkan, and if we think about the fact that in our own homes and in our own lives, we're working to create Mishkan, Mikdash, Ma'at, small Mishkan, small Mikdashes that are filled with Torah, that are filled with Yiras Hashem, that are filled with Avodat Hashem, that are filled with spirituality. We look to the Mishkan to think about the ways in which we can do that in our own homes. We know that the idea that the Mizbeach is supposed to be like a table. And in our own homes, our Mizbeach is our table. There used to be people who would actually take their wooden table that they had in their homes that hopefully were the source of so many mitzvot, whether it was Hachnasat Orchim, whether it was having Shabbat meals, whether it was Talmud Torah, and actually using that as to build coffins as like a way of like showing all the wonderful things that we actually do in this world that has meaning, that has eternality, that takes us as like a simple table that is the basis for everything that we do in this world that has meaning. And so we think about the idea of the fact that Hashem's voice, the way that Hashem communicated to Moshe, came between the kruvim, between these two kruvim. The question is, what are these kruvim? These two winged things, these two winged beings that stand on top of the Aron. And the understanding is that the voice of Hashem seemingly like emanated between, through that out from the inside of the Aron. I think it's, I want to just kind of think about where we're headed, right? So the Aron has Shibrei Luchot, has the broken Luchot, and it also has the Luchot Habrit, which are the complete Luchot that Moshe got after Hashem forgave us, and the new set of Luchot. So there's a reparative aspect and an important aspect that both exist and coexist together. It's not that Hashem's relationship with us exists because we only have the complete Luchot that are a reflection of Hashem forgiving us and like this perfect relationship, but rather our relationship in and of itself contains the broken and the whole, the hard and the good, the pain and the happiness, the sadness of feeling like there was a real rupture in the relationship, and the tshuva, the ability to accept the tshuva and give us something new and something pure. Think about the fact that the kruvim are important. The Rashi and Rashbam, interestingly enough, again, if we go back to thinking about the fact that we're taking Rashbam with us through the Sefer Shemot, and we know that Rashi is Rashbam's grandfather, so it's interesting here. A lot of times, one of the things that I've been noticing, and by no means have I done an exhaustive search on this at all, but I oftentimes note that Rashi and Rashbam tend to align up. Like Rashbam might elaborate on it, but I don't oftentimes see like him taking a totally different position. But again, it's a very small sample size of the Parshanim that I've been seeing in the last few weeks. So it's like completely potentially not true. It's just my own potential observation. But here Rashi has an opinion about the Kruvim that are very different than Rashbam. Rashbam thinks that they are much more angel like animals, and and Rashi takes the position that they look like faces. And there's a lot of discussion about what the difference is and what does that mean. And noting that the first time we hear about the idea of Kruvim is when we were exiled out of Gan Eden, and that it's the Kruvim that are guarding the Garden of Eden, and reflecting back to sin and reflecting back to what does it mean to have these Kruvim again? Are they the same Kruvim? Are they different Kruvim? Are they supposed to evoke us a memory to Gan Eden? Is it supposed to be a kapara, a sign of forgiveness? Again, thinking about this idea of renewal, forgiveness, that seems to be the building block of this integral part of the Kodesh Kadoshim. And the other thing that I want to think about is the idea of miksha. Miksha is, we see it, again, did a quick search, not exhaustive. So if you know somewhere else, I'd love to hear about it. But it seems that more often than not, when the term miksha is used, it's really referring to this idea. And miksha, both according to Rashi and Rashbam and many other Parshanim, is the idea that it was a complete block of gold that was hammered out, and it wasn't actually made into individual pieces that were then put together, but rather the whole thing had to be incorporated as one entire unit. There were 3 items in the Mishkan that are miksha: the menorah, the kruvim, and the chatzatzot, the trumpets. And it's an interesting thing to think about. Why those 3 things? Why do they have to be miksha? Why do they have to be whole and not broken down into pieces? And I was thinking about trying to understand all these moving pieces together. And particularly one of the ideas that I had been reading about was the fact that the menorah was an article that I read about from the virtual Beit Midrash at Gush, and now I can't remember who said it. I think it was Rabbi Liebtag, but I'm not 100% sure. The idea that the menorah, it looks like it has lots of individual lights, but the fact that the menorah is miksha, it was built from one piece of solid gold, reflects the fact that Hashem wants us all to come together. He wants a sense of unity, and that these items reflect the power and importance of being a unified force. But at the same time, I think one of the things that I'm thinking about is the fact that the way in which, and I guess I'm coming back to this idea of Mishkan Ma'at, of the fact that we're all trying to build a Mikdash Ma'at in our home, in our communities, and also thinking about the ways in which we actually build these homes. And we've spent a lot of time, I think, in the last 2 years, really thinking about the ways in which we intentionally engage with children, intentionally engage with other people around us. We've touched a little bit about our own relationships with our partners and spouses, but I really wanted to focus a little bit more this as a foundation point, mostly because I think that when we have the best, most communicative, most functional relationships with our spouse, it actually goes downstream to the people around us, to our children, to our community. And we're sending a message about how we communicate. And when we look to think about the fact that ultimately, more oftentimes in Torah, we talk about the fact that our relationship with Hashem, B'nai Yisrael to Hashem, is oftentimes compared to a spouse. And we also think about the idea that the Kruvim, at times, there is a position that the Kruvim are supposed to be like a husband and wife embracing when they're turning towards each other. There's a lot of discussion in the Gemara, I think it's in Baba Batra, about how the Kruvim are facing each other. Are they looking at each other? Are they turned away from each other? What happens during different times? Do the Kruvim move? Is there this idea about like how you're kind of like looking at each other, but also looking behind each other to see somebody leaving? There's a lot of discussion that this platform is not going to be able to take us the distance to really understanding every aspect and all the different opinions around what the Kruvim mean. And there's so much to learn and so much to uncover. And Baruch Hashem, that's the beauty of life and the beauty of Torah. There's always something more for us to learn, something more for us to uncover, something more for us to think about. But I'm thinking about just the idea that like our relationship with Hashem, which really emanates from the Aron HaKodesh, these two kruvim that are mikshe, that are whole, that stand above something that is whole and something that is broken. And thinking about the idea that Hashem, it feels as though in this construction is creating a framework for us to think about our own homes. That Kodesh Kadoshim, that inner sanctum, is our marriages, is our relationships with the people that are most important in our life. And if that is working right, then that can emanate outwards to the Kodesh, to the Heichal, to the other areas, to the community, to everyone that's surrounding, right? Because we know that the Bnei Yisrael were camped around the Mishkan was at the central part, and thinking about the fact that the things that are mikshed, the things that are whole, also have aspects of them that are individuated, right? So the Kruvim are mikshed, they're whole, and they stand above the two luchot. There are multiple luchot. One is broken and one is whole. And we think about the fact that chatatzot, the trumpets, right? First of all, there's multiple trumpets, and also trumpets make multiple different sounds. And when they come out, they might even sound differently, but they're mikshed, they're whole. The place that they emanate from is a place of wholeness, and that it gets dispersed into sounds, but because it originated as something whole, it allows itself to always come back to a completion, to a sense of wholeness, to a sense of unity, to a unified position. The same thing with the menorah, right? So lots of different flames, but it's mikshed, it's designed to look as one entity that is unified and together. And I think one of the things that there's a million and one things to think about and to talk about in terms of reflecting on how we build relationships with our spouses that are unified, that are aligned. We know the most, so importantly that children shouldn't feel like, oh, I asked daddy and he said no, so I'm going to go ask the other parent. If they say yes, then like, so win for me by comparison to this idea of like having a unified approach, right? Being savvy enough to say, well, what did your other parents say? And I think also really starting to think about the ways, really, though I was thinking about the ways in which we connect. I think that there's this notion out there about Gottman talks a little bit about it, and I've mentioned it before, where we think about this idea that could a person, when you ask people how John Gottman was able to predict the success of a marriage, more often than not, people from like a 2-minute viewpoint of them, people were like, well, were they fighting or not? And that's actually not what it's about. It's about how we connect, how we come back together. It's about the ways in which we make meaningful space for other people in our life. Most importantly, the most important person in our life. Do we check in? Are we thoughtful? Are we thinking about them in front of us? Do we actually just acknowledge the feeling that they're having right now, even if it's not completely aligned with our feelings? How do we reconnect? How do we let ruptures take over our relationships? And how do we not let ruptures take over our relationships? We're two individual people coming together from different places and different perspectives, and everybody in some ways is going through their own things in life. There's the things you go through as independent people and the things you go through as couples together. And thinking about this idea that the ability to have a disagreement that is respectful, that is loving, that you're not scared of, because you know that at its core, you're a unified front coming from a place of love, coming from a place of values. So you can tolerate the disagreement in those moments because it's not going to rupture you. It's going to build you, because at your core, you are mikshet. You are one unified front. You are one unified partnership. You have a unified sense of values and appreciation for each other. And so in that space, you're able to kind of say, I was really hurt by this, or this is how I'm feeling, or I really need you to hear this, that I'm feeling judged by this, whatever it is that you're going through with the other person in that moment. I also think that it has the ability to slow us down, to say, you know what, let me just think about it for a second. Let me just pause. And again, going back and looking back at the way in which Hashem engages with Bnei Yisrael and how Bnei Yisrael engages with Hashem, what is the model for how we can slow down, right? How do we use the trumpets to call out, to reflect, right? To reflect our emotions? How are we, as the other person on the other side of it, hearing the person who's calling out and looking like they have something to tell us? Are we available to hear what the other person's saying with less judgment and more open-heartedness and more kindness? And I think that when we're really being mindful and thoughtful about our relationship with our partner, the piece that is so important is we're also showing our children how to be in relationships, how to struggle, how to have challenges, how to love, how to laugh, how to let things go, how to work through things. And again, I'm not suggesting that everything should be, hashed out in front of children, but I think that there are moments in time, first of all, when we're good at doing it with ourselves and the other people we have in our lives, and we're good at doing it with our spouses, then we're going to also do it with our children. We're also going to teach our children, you said something to me and it really upset me, and I just want to share that. Or I was feeling really sensitive about this, but in an appropriate way, not in an oversharing way, not in an over-enmeshed way, but in an appropriate way. We're teaching our children, not just through our actions, but also through our words, right? We've talked about this in the last couple of weeks, and I've really kind of dug my heels in around it, this idea of the things that we model and the things that we actually articulate with a sense of intentionality, that we worry that is such a critical value, such a critical and important part of our families, that if we just hope that they kind of pick it up because it's in the home, but we haven't articulated it as a value, that maybe that's a loss, that we have to be able to do both. We have to model this, and we also have to articulate it, articulate the ability to fight. I think some of that also has to do with the way in which we fight, right? The way in which and I think a lot of that has to do with the way in which we feel about somebody. If we feel miksha with somebody, we feel whole, we feel shared values, we feel connected. So we're not likely to call them names. We're not likely to we might be hurt, we might be angry, we might be upset deeply, but we're not likely to call them names. We're not likely to do all of the litany of things that actually cause fights to really go off the rails and that become toxic instead of productive. And I think that the flip side of that also is that when you work through something, you're not feeling like there's a tremendous rupture, because you know that the place you're coming from is a place of miksha. You feel heard, you feel connected. It doesn't feel scary. It feels like there was like a sad moment and we were able to work through it. And we hold on to those things, right? But we hold on to them not in the sense of like, oh, I'm waiting for you to do the same thing again so I can call you out on it, because this is confirming. We've spoken about that before also, so I'm just kind of pulling it back in. But this idea that we hold the shibir luchot, we hold the things that are broken, we hold the individual pieces because they're part of the positive aspect. We've worked through something, we're stronger because of it. Our relationship is stronger. We as people are stronger. We're growing, we're expanding. And I think really thinking about the fact that like every time we're going through something new in life, so basically every single day, it's an opportunity to grow our relationships in the most wonderful way. Every day is an opportunity to increase the relationships we have with the people around us and not to take them for granted. And to really recognize the fact that every day is an expansion of love. It's an expansion of communication. It's an expansion of being thoughtful and reflective, and taking in the world around us and setting positive examples for our children and for the home that we're trying to create, that it feels miksha, it feels held for them, it feels whole, it feels thoughtful, it feels connected. It feels like there's also a space for people to talk and share feelings and have a hard day, but have a good day, and kind of come together around that. And so I think just kind of waking up and just, whether it's a moment in tefillah, whether, from a really practical example, like how do we do that on a day-to-day basis? I think sometimes we take things over personally, right? Sometimes we have to take a deep breath and be like, I'm taking this really personally, but I know this is probably not about me. So what's going on for you? That ability to kind of take a step back. Oh, I know, and trust the relationship. I know, you love me, and like, you probably didn't mean it that way. And maybe I'm just like in a place and I'm taking something so personally, or I'm really struggling with this, or I'm having a hard time with this. And I know this is a big ask, but can you do this? And also some of it's even recognizing ourselves, like where can we ask for more help? When can we lean into our partners maybe a little bit more? And I think showing our children that as well is such an important thing. This idea that partnership is also about really working together, troubleshooting together. We're not going to be able to do it all the time, because we're human, and that's the theme. But I think, and some people naturally kind of get into a better rhythm around it than others. But I think thinking about it, and using the opportunity to think about this idea of miksha, of wholeness, and the fact that we start off this parsha with the idea that like the Bnei Yisrael brought everything that was from their heart, like nedivat lev, right? They brought everything that was inside of them. We come to the feeling like we can come to the table literally the literally and spiritually, this idea with our full hearts, open, ready to connect, to love, to work through, to not be scared of conflict, and to show our children that we're not scared of conflict, and to be able to work through conflict in a way that is reminiscent of the Shibrei Luchot, where it gets stored in the Aron HaKodesh, and it's also the source of our continued relationship with Hashem and our continued love of Hashem, that's the way in which we think about all relationships. And we use those things as opportunities to rebuild, to renew, to forgive, and to move forward and to build upon them in a positive, loving, open way. Okay, so I think you can do lots of fun things. I had a moment, I was like, what did I do in the past for Teruma? So I think you could do anything with Nadiv Leib. I love these cupcakes. It's very cute. There's so many heart things because, Valentine's Day is coming up. So sometimes you just got to capitalize on maybe the holidays you don't celebrate for the ones that you want to celebrate. And I did this menorah last year with the fruit. It was very fun. It was very cute. I've seen it with vegetables. It's easy. It's not complicated. Last year, I don't exactly know what was going on in our house that somehow this seemed like a good idea, but I made small. Those are supposed to be, I think, mizbeachs, because like the ramp, and you have the dam on the four corners. It's unclear to me what's happening in the middle. To be perfectly honest, it's possible that that's supposed to be like some type of, I don't know, like maybe like the wood and an animal. Anyways, that's what was happening there. I think I also did like rose, like little mini cakes, because the description of the menorah is actually like a rose petals. And then also I made those little arons with the frosting on the top for like some type of version of a kruvim. So I think you could do lots of fun things. And I challenge people to get a little creative as we move through the next parsha. I remember when I was doing this the first time around, someone's like, okay, yeah, fine. It's all well and good until you hit about like the middle of Shemot. And then like, what are you going to do then? Like, how are you going to get through Vayikra? It'll pick up again, maybe in Bamidbar, but like, what are you going to do? And I remember being like, it'll be okay. We're going to get creative. We're going to have fun. It's going to be good. And so I encourage everybody to get creative, to get fun, to get a little laughter out of it. And in Mir Hashem, it will be a fun learning experience, and a good way to have shared communication at the table and shared discussion, and a way for us to really enhance our own individual arons that we have in our home, and mizbeachs that we have in our home, and shulchans that we have in our home, where we celebrate and we come together around the table to create more spirituality, more love, more connectedness, both within our own homes and with the greater Klal Yisrael.